I'm Paul Chislett. This is the Shake Up on CJAM 99.1 FM, redefining radio in Windsor and Detroit. And as I was mentioning, I played that great song from Playing for Change about Steve Biko, who was murdered by South African police in his opposition to the apartheid system in South Africa way back in the 70s. I forgot what year it was. And, it's before I was just a kid. But anyways, the situation in Gaza is often compared to, rightly so, I believe, to the apartheid system, and the area of Gaza has been described as a vast open air prison for 1.9 million people who live there, something like that. It's one of the most populated areas per square foot probably anywhere in the world. Mohammd Almoayad is an activist on campus here. We've spoken before on the program about various issues, and I wanted to ask him to come in. We've been both following the news, mainstream and not. There's press TV that I've been catching a little bit. Al Jazeera, you have to sort of know how to take it in context with what they're saying, and they'll have someone on one side, and then maybe 5 interviews later, they'll have somebody like Ali Abunimah from Electronic Intifada on to tell it like it really is. But you really have to sift through the news to try to get the real story. So welcome to the program, Mohammed. So we've both been following the news, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are, and what you've seen, and how it appears to you, maybe even how the media coverage is, and what else you know.
I think it's just really important to put it in context, because I think the main way this issue is always completely disfigured in the mainstream media and by the Israeli government and Western governments is by just taking it out of context and making it seem as if it's two separate countries who are just always at war with each other. The context is that the Gaza Strip, which is a small piece of land, was occupied in 1967 by Israel and put under a really brutal military occupation for decades and decades, in which there was just constant oppression and brutality from the Israeli military. Then recently, there's all this hype about the settlers who were moved there illegally under this military occupation being removed, and playing that as if it was a big favor to Gaza, and now it's some sort of independent state. But even after the settlers were removed, there was still a military occupation, essentially. The borders, the airspace, the waters, everything was still under Israeli control, and especially the economics of Gaza. And that allowed them to put this terrible blockade, which has been there for years now, which has put Gaza into a humanitarian crisis in which the majority of the population is under the poverty line, the majority of the population is unemployed. The majority of Gaza is pretty much, like you said, a big open-air prison in which people are literally starving to death. And so it's not two separate countries. It's a giant, powerful state like Israel, completely crushing a state like Gaza, a piece of land and a population like Gaza that has no independence and no freedom. And this is before any violence, direct violence on both sides even started. And this has been the case for decades. So this is the context that the situation is in. So when you want to talk about aggression and who started it and these sort of myths that come up in the mainstream media, the massive aggression in this case has been happening for decades from the Israeli side. Non-stop aggression in the form of military control, in the form of economic blockade, in the form of completely denying any level of legitimate freedom or sovereignty for the population of Gaza to just live normal lives. So at any point you could claim that the people of Gaza have a right to retaliate because they're under this constant aggression. So this is the context that always gets lifted out in the mainstream media. But to make matters worse, this latest escalation of violence was just the latest one. I mean, this is in the context of pretty much a colonial control of Gaza, a piece of land and a population that's under complete military control. On November 8th, basically what happened was what led to the most recent escalation of violence is on November 8th, Israeli soldiers actually invaded Gaza, walked onto Gazan land, and there was an exchange of fire between Palestinian fighters and Israel, and this led to the death of a Palestinian child from the Israeli side. This was the start of it, was the spark, and then there was retaliation from the Palestinian side, and then there was actually a lull in which both sides decided to try to avoid any larger conflict. But then, of course, Israel assassinated the military chief of Hamas, which is one of the top government officials, government leaders in Gaza. And of course, this led Hamas and the military groups in Gaza to say that they're going to be an all-out war with Israel at that point. And so really, the specific aggression in this case came from the Israeli side. Israel itself is the one who provoked responses from Gazans to try to initiate this conflict. And so this plays into what the larger purpose of Israel's actions are in this case. And I think the really good analysis of what's happening is that basically Israel tends to try to do things to provoke Gazan responses from Hamas and all the other military groups. And they did something very similar in the massacre that happened a couple years ago, in which they look for an excuse to try to invade. They look for an excuse to try to drop bombs and sort of just decimate the population. And so these rockets being fired themselves from the Hamas and from the Gazan side are completely ineffective. In fact, the majority of them don't reach anywhere in Israel. They're actually knocked out of the sky from Israel's really advanced missile defense system. So the rockets from Gaza are really not that serious of a threat. On the one hand, they are a serious issue because they are they are harming innocent people on the Israeli side. But again, they are a response to the aggression from Israel. And so it's really despicable when Israeli officials try to claim that they're doing this for self-defensive reasons. It's so misleading, especially when you take it out of the context of the facts of what have happened in the last week, and the larger context of the fact that Gaza is a virtual colony of Israel that's under complete, total control by Israel, which completely oppresses and brutalizes the population. And so what's happened recently now in the last couple days, when the conflict pretty much seems to be heading into all-out war like it was in 2008 and 2009, is Israel just started its systematic murder of civilians, which is a normal technique for Israel. That it's done it in Lebanon, it did it 2 years ago in Gaza in Operation Cast Lead, and now it's doing it again. And really, this is a method that Israel uses to just try to put the Palestinians in their place. So another big mythology that comes out from the Israeli side, from the Western politicians and mainstream media, is that there's naturally always casualties in these sort of wars. So it's a war, so you can expect civilians that civilians are going to get killed. But it's really important to note that really it's not that when Israel assassinated the military chief of Hamas, they were able to target his car specifically. And they showed it off on the internet. They put up a video showing his car driving and showing how precise their bombs are, how precise they can know where they're dropping their bombs. So if you have the precision to hit a moving car, then if you drop a bomb on a school, if you drop a bomb on a funeral, which they've done, then you can bet that that's where they were targeting. And of course, this just means this is just systematic, deliberate murder of civilians. In fact, the conflict escalated in the last week because they literally did drop a bomb on the funeral of the boy who they shot on November 8th. So they shot the child, he was killed, they were having a funeral, and they bombed the funeral. And so this is just deliberate, systematic murder of civilians. It's not just collateral damage, accidental damage. Israel does want to drop bombs on civilians, specifically to send this message that most fascist states try to send to populations they're trying to crush, that if you resist in any way, we're going to do as much damage as possible to you, we're going to kill you, we're going to destroy you, and just show you that if you even put your head up a little bit, you have no hope in the world. And that's what Israel's pretty much doing.
Frighteningly, they interviewed the spokesperson for Benjamin Netanyahu on Al Jazeera, and the only pointed question they asked him was if this was because of the elections coming up in January. And, a guy like Netanyahu always looks good when they're pounding the heck out of somebody else, and they vehemently denied it. I think it was another BBC report vehemently denied that. And yet, other credible sources said this is all about the elections coming up in Israel. And what you're describing, and I hope listeners check it out on Electronic Intifada. There's an article published. That is a source that is guaranteed to be telling the truth. And they lay it all out. November 8th, the fatal injury of a young child that was simply playing football. The Israeli army moved in, I guess, to claim more land. It sounds like they moved in with soldiers and tanks. In a retaliation, on November 10th, the Palestinian fighters attacked an Israeli army jeep. I remember seeing that in the news. It was on Facebook too. And then on November 11th, there's an organization called CJAM Count that recorded no rockets launched on November, and this is the area where there was the factions in Hamas and Palestinian factions, were in talks over a truce, and then the Israelis managed to provoke again, and it's all out. There's a missile that landed in Jerusalem. Well, it's not all out yet. It could be a lot worse, I suppose. So I think what we're both agreeing on, and I know there's a lot of other points of view out there on pro-Israel, but this cannot, if you can't live in a state of denial any longer. This is a power in the area. It's got overwhelming military superiority, brutally slaughtering people that have absolutely no defense. They're literally in an open air prison, and we followed along in this program with flotillas to Gaza, attempts to break the siege of Gaza, which the Israelis brutally suppressed as well. And interestingly enough, with the change of government in Egypt, they're at least the rhetoric is at least saying that Israel has to cease harming people the way they are, and that Israel is going to back the Gazans. It's yet to be seen what that really means. So we've got an unfolding situation, and nobody really we know, as you pointed out, we know from past experience what's likely to fall out in the future in the next few days. And I guess we'll be watching in horror. So I think, too, one thing I'm going to be looking for is ways to help, probably just financially, but ways to help. There's going to be even greater need. The hospitals are overwhelmed, all of it in an area where they have so little already. And as I said, by coincidence, because this has been in the planning with Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, there's been an art exhibit touring the country, I believe, and it's coming to Windsor starting on Monday. It's all artwork by children in Gaza that experienced the exact same kind of violence in 2008, 2009, and they've recorded it with their artwork, and I'm wondering what you could say about that exhibit coming up on campus.
Well, the exhibit's entitled The Child's View from Gaza, and like you said, it was collected by a delegation of activists who went to Gaza after Operation Cast Lead, which was the massacre that happened in 2008 2009 in Gaza, in which up to 1,400 Palestinians were massacred, the majority of them civilians, upwards of 400 children. So basically it was one of the worst things Israel's ever done to Gaza. It was one of the biggest massacres. And so in the aftermath, there were many children who joined art therapy classes and were basically having to try to express their trauma and their feelings through drawing, through art. And that's basically the purpose of the art therapy program. And the activists saw the art by the children, and they thought that this would be a perfect way to sort of try to express what the situation was, what happened in Operation Cast Lead, and what the situation in Gaza to the average person who had no connection with what was happening in Gaza. So basically the idea is a child's perspective of what's happening is really pure. It's something that sort of diffuses any tension, political tension or social tension, because it's just the innocent view of a child. And so a lot of the pictures show really horrific scenes of dead bodies, of bombs being dropped, and you see it sort of gets the message across about how horrific this conflict is and how terrible Operation Cast Lead was on the Palestinians, especially on the children. And it's important to note that the majority of the population of Gaza, which is already like 1.7 million people living in the most densely populated area in the world, the majority in poverty, the majority unemployed, and the majority are children under the age of 15. So the majority of the population is children. So whenever Israel commits these sort of massacres, whenever Israel commits any sort of crimes against Gaza, they're committing them against largely children. So this exhibit is just going to be something really unique and special that hopefully people are going to be able to connect really well with and understand the level of evil that these children have lived through and witnessed from Israeli military occupation.
And there's a kickoff Monday night as the reception?
Yeah, the opening reception is Monday at 5:30. The exhibit itself is going to be in the CAW Student Center at the University of Windsor, and it's going to be in the Commons area, the CAW open area, in front of the info desk, and that's where the opening reception will be Monday at 5:30. And also on top of the actual exhibit, which is going to be there all week, we're going to be showing a movie called Tears of Gaza, which is going to be shown Tuesday at 5 o'clock in Chrysler Hall North, room G125. This is just a documentary showing what happened in 2008, 2009, just showing footage from the massacre and showing what actually interviews. A big part of the documentary is just interviewing what children in Gaza went through there. So it's completely connected to the exhibit. And Tuesday is also International Children's Day. So it sort of ties into the whole theme of children suffering in Gaza from Israeli aggression.
That's going to be a tough documentary to watch, considering everything that's going on. But I'm looking forward to the exhibit and also to that documentary. So I want to thank you very much for coming in. And I urge listeners to, if you hear something on the mainstream news, do the research and check out places like Electronic Intifada, Press TV. Just search around. I mean, even if you have to put in a search engine, something like Alternative Media Gaza, you'll come up and, we all have an intuition and a sense of, even if we can't really know because we're not in these rooms where these decision makers are, and we're so far removed from men that order war, like they do. Most of us, we're not going to be able to relate to that kind of mind. I hope we're not. So we probably have a better intuition as working class people than we really realize when we're looking at news and sifting through things to see what has the ring of truth, what seems right, what feels right on an intuitive level, and to talk it up as much as possible with people that you think might have more information, not just knee-jerk reactionaries that say, my country right or wrong and that sort of nonsense. And also, as horrific as everything that's happening is our own government and our outrageous foreign minister, John Baird, who is, throwing his hat full support behind the Israeli massacre, calling it, a right to defense. It's absolutely unconscionable. I cannot get my head around the fact that we have a government like we do right now, and I'm feeling like I didn't do enough to prevent that. But,
it's an important part of what we can do, actually. It was what we did yesterday in the rally that we had on campus against the Israeli military operation starting. We started a petition to send to Brian Massey and Joko Martin, and we sent out emails telling people to email their MPs and tell them to demand that this stop and to denounce the claims by our government that the massacring of civilians is okay.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, they're pretty quick to say we got 7 emails about problems with unions, so we have to have legislation to change the way unions are audited. So imagine if they get 1,000 emails from people that said that you're wrong, John Baird, you're a monster, along with the others. So. They would. That's a great point. There is something we can do, and we have to raise our voices as much as possible. Mohammd, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.